So earlier this year I was talking with some of the folks in the Pixel Glass Discord server, which is a server primarily for Scorpion engine development, among other things. And this particular conversation was whether or not it would be possible to bring Sonic to the Amiga via the Scorpion engine. And there was a bit of discussion about how to do certain things. I know one of the things I was specifically interested in how it could be done was the Sonic 1 bonus stages. Because of all the tile rotation that happens during those bonus stages, I thought it'd be quite a difficult thing to achieve on the Amiga. And you know, certain games like Bob's Bad Day came up, which is very Sonic bonus stage-esque, for example. And also Kid Chaos was part of that conversation. You know, that's very got a very Sonic-esque platform style to it. You know, it's got the speed and similar sort of parallax effects running on the A500. But the caveat to this is, you know, these games were designed specifically for the Amiga in mind, so it's not like they're actual Sonic levels converted, if you know what I mean. They're written with the limitations of the hardware in mind, so they run to the hardware's strengths. But at the time I had taken quite a few projects on. I was currently deep into doing my conversion of Wardner from the arcade to the Amiga 1200. And I'd also started a Double Dragon conversion for ECS Amigas as well at the time. So, you know, the idea kind of fell onto the back burner, so to speak. And with the recent news of Reassembler's new project, where he's going to attempt to bring Sonic to the Amiga platform, I sort of realised that, well, there's not much point in me trying to bring Sonic to the Amiga via the Scorpion engine anymore. But something in me just wouldn't let the idea die. You know, I still wanted to delve into the mechanics of the game and learn the nuances, because that's kind of where I get my kicks from, you know, sort of delving into the mechanics, learning what makes the game tick, that sort of thing I sort of get right involved in. And I still sort of thought, you know, what would have been possible with Scorpion engine in the sort of Sonic realm anyway. So I decided to do a Sonic tech demo on the Amiga using the Scorpion engine. And initially this endeavour was really only supposed to be a sort of graphical look and feel. You know, what could I include from the Mega Drive original? Could I get the foregrounds in? How much of the colour palette would I need to sacrifice? Could I do it in 32 colours? Would I do it in 16 colours? And then sort of how close could I replicate Sonic's movements and animation nuances? How close could I get to the original game without any of the source code and knowing exactly what the developers did with Sonic as a character on the Mega Drive? So after about a week, I'd kind of got all the graphics together, all the basic graphics for the level, and just got some basic movement for the enemy sprites, and, you know, sort of got Sonic's general movement down. His, you know, his sort of jump speed, his running. I hadn't gone full bore and sort of, you know, done his spins or anything like that. It was mainly just, you know, moving around and stopping because of the acceleration and the inertia. You know, Sonic's got that sort of skid move where he comes to a stop and turns. So all that was sort of in place. But, you know, then one thing sort of led to another, and then before I knew it, the project had sort of gone way beyond scope and had kind of ballooned into a level 1 demo of Mega Drive Sonic 1 in a sort of 32 colour and 16 colour variation. So after all that toil and trouble, this is what I came up with. And the footage you're seeing now is of the 32 colour version of the demo. And this is a kind of heavy spec version of the demo, which is running on an Amiga 1200 with 2 megs of fast RAM, just to sort of help with the DMA issues that you get with the slow RAM and, you know, the amount of actors that are present in any given Sonic level. And another thing that I noticed straight off the bat was just how big the map data for a typical Sonic level actually is. And you know, through some conversations in the Discord channel, Sonic on the Mega Drive kind of streams in blocks of the level at a time from the ROM, which of course is kind of not possible on the Amiga because you've got the limited memory that you can load all the assets into, and that's all you've got. So balancing how much map data there actually is for a Sonic game with how much RAM you've got and how much DMA speed you've got is going to be one of the big issues for Reassembler and his efforts, I think. So before any kind of optimizations or technical workarounds that might be possible with the Scorpion engine, this is the kind of machine you would need to sort of chuck around the data in a typical Sonic level on the Amiga. One of the big problems I had with the map data itself was just, you know, how many actors or sprites are active on these maps. Because one of the nuances of Sonic is the rings, for example, they don't sit in the tile system, in the map tile system in any way. They literally are sprites placed wherever the developers wanted to place them, which means, you know, with the map data already as big as it was, I did think about maybe trying to spoof the rings into the tile data somehow, but it was getting a little bit too long in the tooth at that point. I thought, you know, look, I've set out and achieved what I wanted to achieve. It was literally to work out the limitations of the Scorpion engine in this regard and sort of work out what could be possible for Sonic, and maybe with some optimization in that regard I could probably reduce the blitter overload and you know, by pushing the rings into the tile data. The same thing with the spikes as well. Actually, there's quite a lot of spikes, say on this first Green Hill Zone, and all of these are individually placed sprites as well. So they're not even blocked together. You know, when you sort of watch the game as you're playing it, you don't really realise. You think, oh, that's just part of the level, sort of, you know, thinking in the back of your mind about it. But they're actually individually placed sprites, so they're all individual actors as well, which is a big problem for Amiga and the Blitter, or especially in my experience with it so far. And what I did do with these spikes is I did actually hard lock those into an extra bit of map data, and the collision data for those is also tile data or block data, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, one thing about Scorpion is that at the moment the engine is locked to single playfield mode, which obviously reduces the ability of parallaxing. So what we've got in the background here is a copper sprite parallax, where we sacrifice 2 of the hardware sprites to display this image in the background. It's a 32 pixel repeating image that is then got some parallax values added to it to sort of give movement to the different layers of that image, which, you know, is not as detailed as the Mega Drive second layer or background layer. We're missing some of the green in the trees and things like that are on the Mega Drive version, but I think, you know, it whizzes past so fast. It gives the sort of look and feel of the Mega Drive version. I don't think it detracts too much because there's quite a lot of grass in the foreground and trees and things like that, so I don't think you notice it so much. One thing that can't be done in the copper sprite parallax is colour changes, or at least not with Scorpion. Those colours are sort of locked in place, so it was not possible to add the sort of shimmery water effect that you see in the Mega Drive version, which I'd love to have had, but it just wasn't possible for this demo. So now we'll skip down to the 16 colour version that runs much nicer on the ECS machines. Now what you might notice with this version is that because Scorpion is using the single playfield mode, we do have access to the full 16 colour range in the foreground. That enabled me to create this kind of nice universal colour palette for the game, which I think still captures the essence of the Mega Drive original. Just a quick shout out to Mike from Bitbeam Canon, who gave me some great help with condensing games into a 16 colour palette for the Amiga, so cheers for that, dude. One thing we've done here on this version is, because we've got the 16 colour palette and the extra 16 colours in the sprite range, we were able to get the rings for this version into the remaining 6 hardware sprites, which was something I didn't actually utilise in the previous 32 colour version, because early on in that version I was attempting to do foreground layers and things like that, and then I was trying to do UI elements in the sprites and whatnot, and by the time we got a bit further down the road I'd sort of neglected the sprites in that version. I think with a bit of optimization I could probably get Sonic himself into the sprite range on the 32 colour version, which will definitely help the performance situation there. I'm just going to have to reduce him in colour depth to get him in there. I'm not sure I'm going to have to knock off too many colours for him there. So this version is quite a good look at what Sonic might look like in 16 colours. Now of course, if Reassembler decides to go down the dual play field mode for the Amiga, then he's only going to have access to 8 colours per layer, which is going to make things quite difficult to keep the sort of look of the Mega Drive version, because if you've got Sonic in the foreground, he's only going to have access to the 8 colours that are also going to be used in the foreground objects, which have got a lot of greens, a lot of oranges and browns. There's some colours that could probably cross-contaminate in that sort of 8 colour palette there, but I think if you start going down that route, you're going to start getting to the point where the game's going to look a little bit 8-bit at that point, because there's so many, you know, it's not like a game like Agony where you've got a lot of sprites that are using a sort of colour palette universally. There's a lot of things that pop out in a Sonic game. You know, the grass, you know, pops out at you, for example, and then, you know, that's 4 colours down. So how many colours are you going to reduce in the grass before you're going to start allowing Sonic to have some colours and things like that? So even with a 16 colour palette shared between all assets, towards the end of you know, putting this demo together, I'd realised that I'd kind of forgotten about the waterfall effect that you see specifically in Green Hill Zone. I'd already achieved that quite successfully with the 32 colour version, because I simply reserved 4 colours and did a palette cycle on those because I had the spare colours. A lot of the enemies and everything on Sonic use a lot of the same colours. You know, there's like a palette that almost covers every single enemy and Sonic on the first stage of Sonic. So that wasn't a problem for the 32 colour version, but then I sort of thought, oh well, I kind of had in the back of my mind that I would do the waterfall as a block or tile animation for the 16 colour version, and so of course I used up most of the 16 colours for a universal palette for all the assets in the level, and then realised, oh dear, the DMA required just to change a single or 2 blocks even. I think I've got 1 block at the top for the beginning of the waterfall, and then I copied 1 block for the entire rest of the waterfall. But because it's so many of that 1 block that has to be changed on those wide waterfalls, the DMA required to shift all those pixels was just too much for even the AGA machine to do successfully in Scorpion. Now of course Reassembler might have a few tricks up his sleeves in that regard, but it's definitely better to have that kind of effect done in a palette cycle, because it's far less intensive. All you're doing is remapping the colour. You know, you're not changing any data in the tile set or anything like that. So unfortunately for this demo, the waterfall was not possible. It is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just a tech demo. It wasn't planned. It was just sort of ad hoc at the time. It was like, right, okay, Reassembler's going to do this bloody game now. There's no point in me doing it, but I want to have a go and see what I could have possibly come up with whilst we're waiting to see, you know, what Reassembler comes up with. So yeah, guys, well, that's basically it. I'm not going to waffle on anymore. I think I've sort of tried to illustrate the problems I've had with the vast data that Sonic requires you to shift around to get the same effect as what's going on in the Mega Drive version, and I've learnt, you know, the nuances of some of the Sonic gameplay and things like that, and I've had a bit of fun putting this together, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's been a success either way. You know, maybe you gained something from it, maybe you didn't, I don't know. But anyway, the demo is available on my itch page. Links will be in the description. I am going to release the Scorpion engine source files for this project on my Patreon. Links will also be in the description. So thanks for watching, guys. Leave us a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you on the next update.